Hi, I'm Judith Patterson. I'm a Stampin' Up! Independent demonstrator in Texas. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for dropping in. So today we're going to be making a card straight out of the 2021-2022 annual catalog. I just always like to look at the catalog and see what other stampers have done, see what kind of inspiration Stampin' Up! Has shared with us. And let me tell you, there's always some great ideas in this catalog, every catalog, that you can copy as is or change it up a little bit. So I've already made one of these cards, not just like is in the catalog, but I decided to change it up a little. So the card, let me just tell you first, the card we're going to be making is on page 158, and it's this card here, using the Brilliant Wings die set. Now this is showing the bundle. You can buy just the dies, or you can buy the dies with the Butterfly Brilliant stamps. I have both and I love them and use them all the time, but butterflies are pretty much my favorite thing. So if you love butterflies, I suggest you get that. But you can just get the dies, and this card is only using the dies. So instead of making my first card just like they have in the catalog, I decided to change it up a little. I love this rainbow glimmer paper. I don't know if you can see that shine and that sparkle on that glimmer paper. But so I decided, instead of doing the background like they did, I changed my card base color to Bermuda Bay. And this is Blackberry Bliss, and then of course I used the rainbow glimmer paper behind all this white butterfly detail stuff. So another change is I do not have the Threw It Together stamp set that Stampin' Up! Used in the catalog, but I do have this amazing mini messages stamp set. Now this is one stamp, and it stamps all of this at once, and then it has a single die that you can get with it, and cut all of these images, all of these sentiments out at once, which is really great. So you end up with tons of sentiments. So I have two of these little containers. They're awesome because you can pull out these dividers across here and make the sections as big as you want. So I've got two of these, and I just keep my extra ones in it. You can also use this as a background stamp, which is pretty cool. Okay, so here's my fun one. Well, they're both fun, and I added another glimmer paper butterfly to the inside. Alright, but let me flip my camera around and we'll start stamping, and I'll show you everything that you need to make the card just like it is, except for that sentiment stamp down the catalog. Give me just a second. Okay, so you're going to need an 8.5 by 5.5 inch piece of Coastal Cabana for your card base. It's scored at 4 1/4 inches, and here in the US this is just a standard card size. It's half a sheet of 8.5 by 11 inch paper. Then we're using a 4 1/8 inch by 5 3/8 inch piece of basic white cardstock. This is supposed to be cut the same, and then I used the die to cut out the butterflies. I used the big die. For some reason I cut it a little wide, so once I put everything together I'll just use my paper snips and trim off these edges. So, but before I go any further, let me show you, when you cut this piece out using this large die, you want to try to not have a bunch of tiny little pieces on the edge. Here, let me show you what I'm talking about. So on this card I goobered, and I wasn't paying close enough attention, and when I cut out this piece I came too close to the top with this butterfly, and so I ended up with this awkward piece here. Same thing with this butterfly. I had this tiny little piece here, and it's really easy to lose these little pieces like this. And then down here, I had this piece that I had to go through all my little pieces and find so that I could add that back once I added the intricate butterflies in. And this one is only 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I decided to try it a little bit smaller, and now we're going to go a little bit bigger and do 4 1/8 of an inch by 5 3/8 of an inch and see what the difference is. So just keep that in mind when you're cutting, to either make sure you don't end up with those tiny little random pieces, or just keep up with them whenever you cut them out, because you're going to end up with several pieces. So just keep those tiny ones handy. Okay, so ink colors: Mango Melody, Fresh Freesia, Pale Papaya. There's quite a glare is in there. And Coastal Cabana. I'm also going to be using Memento to stamp my sentiment. And since I'm using this large mini messages stamp set, I have a 5 by 6 inch piece of Fresh Freesia for that. But if you're just using a normal sentiment from a stamp set, you can just use a scrap piece of Fresh Freesia for that. Just big enough to have your sentiment on it. So you're also going to want to have, I don't know what I've done with mine, but you're also going to want to have some adhesive sheets, really just one adhesive sheet to use with these butterflies. I used liquid glue to put everything, like this outline bit down, and I used that to attach this glimmer paper to the card base. And I use Stampin' Dimensionals here, but for all of this, for these intricate butterflies, it's just easier to use the adhesive sheets. You'll also want some in-colored jewels. I love these. These are so fun. But as you can see, if you don't have them, it's okay. I didn't use them on this card, and I think it still looks gorgeous. Okay, so once you have this cut out using that big die, you'll want to get, if you have a Stamparatus, I highly recommend it, and I don't know why that just went blurry. Nope. There we go. So I do have a piece of paper here, and I'm going to take that basic white solid sheet, and I'm layering. This is just computer paper, just printer paper. I pulled out of my printer, cut in half, and ran it through the die machine with a large die. So I'm going to line this up on it and see. I want everything to overlap the right way. So I'm just using this as a stencil, and I like to use the Stamparatus because I can use these magnets and hold everything down. Okay, so I'm going to start with Pale Papaya. It's my lightest color, so I'm going to go with it first. And I'm just going to start at the top. Okay, this might be crazy. I'm not going to do it just like they say to do it. I'm going to take this sheet off. Forget that sheet. We don't need that sheet. And I'm just going to put Pale Papaya across the top. Because it's going to be covered up anyway. So, you can see what I'm doing. Just rubbing it on. I'll start off my sheet. This is another reason why it's good to have something like grid paper behind your project so that you don't get ink all over your table or your work surface. So I'm just starting off the sheet so that I'll show you what happens. If you start on it, you get kind of a darker blob, and that's actually not so bad, but sometimes it's pretty bad. And you can go as light or as dark as you want. And it doesn't have to be in a straight line. You can see I'm kind of pulling this over on the edge on the left here. And in person, this is darker than it's showing up on the camera. I don't know why it doesn't pick this up as well. Partly I think it's trying to focus while I'm moving. That's kind of frustrating. Oh, and it's just getting worse and worse. Let me stop for a second. There, now you can see what I'm doing. But still, it's a little darker in real life. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over to the Mango Melody and add some of that to my project. And I'm not real worried about mixing these colors. Mango Melody is going to be a little bit darker than the Pale Papaya. And they're okay. Now see what I did there? That is what you don't want to do. I started without rubbing off. So let's see if I can rub that in a little bit. Very frustrating. So I could flip my paper over and start over. And if I was doing something that wasn't going to be mostly covered, I definitely would. But I think it's going to work out okay in the end because, partly because I'm just going to keep adding some color here. Maybe that'll smooth out some. But also because there's going to be so much cardstock over the top here, I think it'll be fine. So I'm also kind of going back and blending into that Pale Papaya that I've already laid down with the blending brush before this. Now you can use the same blending brush for all the colors. Just make sure that you clean it by just rubbing it off on a piece of scratch paper. I like to have several. So I'm going to grab this one here. I use it for blues and purples. I'm going to use it to use my, actually no, I'm going to use Coastal Cabana next. I'm going to save Fresh Freesia for the bottom. So I think I'm going to use this one. This one I use for greens, and Coastal Cabana, it could really be either way. But since I'm going to be using Fresh Freesia next, I'm going to save my blue one to use with Fresh Freesia. I'm going to use my green one with Coastal Cabana. So I'm remembering to start off my cardstock. And just blend, blend, blend. And it's up to you as to how dark or light you want yours to be. Like I say, mine in person is so much darker than what it is showing up on the camera. I'll see if I can hold it up in a minute and get you a better view of what's really going on here. just keep picking up color off my pad, starting off my cardstock, and then I'm blending up into the Mango Melody just a little bit. I may even go back at the end of this and add a little bit of Pale Papaya. So I'm going to pick my sheet up so that maybe you can see the color a little bit better. Oh, that Pale Papaya is still just not coming through very well on the camera. Clean off some of this Mango Melody. I'll add a little bit more Pale Papaya to the top. Maybe that'll help. So starting off the page, I do not like how blurry that gets while I'm blending. Once more. It's starting to show up a little better now. Okay, I'm going to call that good. So now I'm grabbing my Fresh Freesia and my blue-purple blending brush. And I'm just going to add this to the bottom of the card. And look at that, I started right on the card again. Okay, I'm going to use one of my magnets to hold this in place so I don't get fingerprints all over my card. And again, I'm blending back up into that Coastal Cabana. Just a little. Let's use another magnet. So you don't have to have the Stamparatus to do this at all. You can certainly blend just using scrap paper and maybe washi tape. Maybe cut your basic white just a little bit big. Then you can use washi tape to hold the sides down. And then just when you're through, be very careful pulling that washi tape off and then trim your extra side off. Okay. It's a nice rich color now. It's so pretty. Alright, so now I'm going to use my liquid glue. And I'm going to get my silicone mat. Again, you don't have to have this. I just like it because it's easy to pull off any glue that I get outside of my cardstock. I don't have to worry about it getting on my project somewhere where it doesn't need to be. So remember, I'm cutting off this edge here, so I'm not putting glue there. like using the liquid glue because it gives me just a little bit to adjust everything. It's taking me so long to set down, I might not have that little bit this time. There we go. So I started in this corner and made sure it was lined up. I don't want anything to bubble up or be super off center and crooked. And there we have it. We're all glued down. And now I'm just going to take my paper snips and this little bit that I did extra. I'm just going to snip it off. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and ink up first I want to make sure this is in the right place. I think right there looks good. Maybe just a skosh this way, and then I'm going to use a couple of these magnets just right on the edge. Hopefully that'll hold it down well enough. Okay, so now I'm gonna ink up my oh, this is the wrong ink. I grabbed my StazOn. Thank goodness I had that plastic on it. Okay, so this is my Memento ink. This is what I meant to grab. So you can use a large clear block. Our largest block fits these big background stamps like this. But I love the Stamparatus for things like this because sometimes, especially with these big stamps, it's hard to get your image nice and rich and dark the first time you stamp. So I always pull this and then place it down, and I'm just going to rub all over it, trying to get as much ink onto my cardstock as possible. And then when I lift it up, so see, there's places that are just not super clear. Most of it looks pretty good, but there's a couple places that are just, I think I'd use a little bit more ink. So I'm going to ink the whole thing up again, paying special attention to those places like this. I'm so happy to celebrate with you. It didn't come off just right, so it could be a little darker. I'm just going to make sure I get that inked up real well. Then I'm pulling it out this way and then placing it back down. That way I know it's going to be right. And then I'm going to make sure I push this down real well. And I think for my card this time, I think I'm going to use this Happy Birthday. Okay, that should be good. Much better. So now, I'll set that aside. Close up my ink. And I always store my Memento and my StazOn upside down. I got ink on me already. That way, all the ink goes to the top of the pad. The Stampin' Up pads, these store upside down naturally because they flip. So it's flipping open. So when you close it, it's already upside down. So you don't have to worry about flipping it. Okay, so now I'm pulling back out my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine again. Setting my cardstock on. I'm going to get my die. I'm just going to line this up as best as I can. I typically end up losing one or two every time I do this. But the main thing that I want is the happy birthday. So as long as it's lined up right, I'm not too worried about the rest of it. It does have this heart and a star and a couple of more stars down towards the bottom to help you line it up. So far I have not, I guess I'm just not patient enough. I haven't sat down and made sure that everything lines up just right. But it's always very, very close. So you can tell that one is just a little off. So I'm running it through. I'm going to run it back to me. And there we go. All my wonderful little pieces. Okay, I'm going to set this one aside. The rest of these I'm going to put in a pile and I'll put them up later. Okay, so now I want to show you. So for the center of all these butterflies, we're cutting the intricate butterflies. So those are all individual die cuts. I've already cut out the rest of them, but I wanted to go ahead and do this one. So I have, oh, I turned it over, but you can't see. I have the adhesive sheet already trimmed and placed on the back. The adhesive sheets are double-sided, of course, so I peeled off one side, stuck it to the cardstock, and left the other side still on. So I'm going to flip that over, put my butterfly down on top of it, make my sandwich. So for these dies, these are so intricate. There's so many little pieces. So I run it through, and I bring it back, and I run it through, and I bring it back. And some of them, like the biggest one, this one, I would run it through and bring it back again. Especially having the adhesive already on the back of it, that just adds another layer that it's got to cut through. So I do recommend putting it through at least twice, maybe 3 times. Okay, so now we're going to use the take your pick tool and just make sure everything, oh yeah, that's coming out real easy. So I'm going to pull that off. Poke out all these itty bitty pieces. Makes quite a mess. So these round circles, these are not to poke out. These are to help you release your butterfly from your die. So see how it's all in there nice and snug? So I'll poke these circles and it helps me get that started coming off. Now I need to start peeling my backing off. And I thought my take your pick tool might help me with that, but it is not. I'm going to use old-fashioned fingernails. Okay, so now it's like putting a puzzle together. And the recipe for this card says they also use adhesive, the foamed adhesive sheets. I don't have those yet. They're on my wish list. I think probably they use those on some of these butterflies and pop these butterflies up a little bit, which would be amazing. But I just don't have those, and I don't think it would work as well with, I think it would just be messy trying to use Stampin' Dimensionals with that. So like I said, I've already cut all of these other butterflies out, and I've already added the adhesive, and I poked most of the extra little pieces out as well. So we just need to peel the backing off and finish putting our butterfly puzzle together. And the Take Your Pick tool is another one of those optional things that I highly recommend, especially when using intricate dies like these, because you can see how much easier it is to release these from the dies having that. Oh boy, where does this one go? It goes up here. And see, this is where I messed up and forgot to start blending off my cardstock, but it just looks like a darker spot now that I've got it covered with all this other cardstock. Looks good. So many boo-boos in stamping can just be covered up and ignored, and you can just move right on and nobody will ever be the wiser unless you tell them. And before I glue anything down, I'm checking to make sure I have all the pieces pushed out. And you can see that these butterflies are hanging over the edge pretty much everywhere. But again, that's expected. And we'll just use paper snips, or you can use your paper trimmer. I think it's easier with paper snips though, to just trim off the extra. And that's why we're doing this before we glue it to the to the card base. It would be much harder to clean that up if it was already on the card base. So this one I forgot. I don't like to throw away any of my adhesive sheets. So whenever I have little strips left over, I keep them. And like on this one, I had 3 little pieces left that I put on the back of this so that it was nice and covered. And you know how I was talking about making sure you keep up with all your little bits. Evidently I missed a little bit. So I could go through this whole jar of little pieces. I do not want to do that. So what I'm going to do is this, I can see, has some adhesive sheet still on the back of it here. So what I'm going to do is figure out which die this is. It's this one here. And I need the bottom. So I'm going to put it just like this. And I'm going to run it through my die cut machine. Okay, so now I don't want that part, I want this part. So I'm going to take this sheet, this backing off of the sheet. And I'm going to add this right here. Okay. I'm just making sure everything's stuck on really well before I start cutting. Go. That looks good. Make sure everything is stuck on. Okay, so now I'm going to use my liquid glue on the back. Attach this to the front of the card and center it up as well as I can. Okay, and then don't want these dash marks on here, so I'm just gonna trim this off. And then I'm gonna use Stampin' Dimensionals. I'm going to go ahead and just place this pretty much where they have theirs placed in the catalog. No thinking required. And some days I just need cards that don't require thinking. Okay. So then I'm going to use my In Color Jewels. I'm going to use a mixture of small and large. I'm going to put papaya down here. Let's see, I'm using that Take Your Pick tool again. It has sticky stuff on the end, just little putty. And you can twist it and more putty will come out. And you can also, if you end up using all of your putty, this comes off and you can replace the whole thing. Stampin' Up! Sells refills. Handy. Oh, I've got a hair on that one. There we go. And now our card is all finished. All we need to do is add a sheet of, actually you don't even have to. I mean, the inside is light enough. You can just write on that. You can add a butterfly in the corner if you would like to. You can add another sentiment. You can just leave it blank, whatever you want to do to the inside. It's a clean slate and ready to be used any way you want to. So I hope you enjoyed this card. I know this is a longer video than I normally do. This isn't a difficult card, but there's a lot of little pieces and a lot of little steps to it. So let me grab that other one, and you can look at them side by side and see which one you like better. This one certainly didn't take as long to put together because we didn't have that step, or I didn't have that step of using the blending brushes. However, I did stamp my sentiment in Versamark. I did the whole big many messages stamp in Versamark, and then I sprinkled it with the white embossing powder and heat embossed it I love the way that looks. So I think both of these are gorgeous. Fun cards, and you can use them, especially with this mini messages set. You can use them for anything. This has birthday, be brave, be strong, just a card to say hello, thank you, happy anniversary, congratulations. I mean, you have got so many options to choose from with this set. And of course, this card is so versatile. You can use it with pretty much any sentiment. So, y'all have a happy afternoon. Let me know if you have any questions. Hit the subscribe button down below if you like this video. And happy stamping.